What's up guys, welcome back to another how to build around this commander video. Real quick, I would like to thank you all for helping the channel get to 40,000 subscribers. That's a massive milestone. Just this time last year, we were only at around 20,000, so thank you so much for joining. I really do appreciate it, and remember to subscribe if you have not already. Now, not so long ago, I made a video about the Sheoldred leak for Dominaria United, and it was a very powerful card, but I didn't suspect it of being a fake leak, just because we don't tend to get that many of them. And the card that was shown here, Sheoldred Insidious Conqueror, was pretty convincing. I didn't see anything here that would lead me to believe that this was a fake card. The stamps at the bottom looked genuine. Set symbol might have been a bit large, but other than that, it looked normal. So this turning out to be fake is kind of a bummer, and I know most people are in the same boat. I mean, a lot of people made videos about this Sheoldred. And of course, you have the people who are after the fact saying they knew it was fake the whole time. Kudos to you for having a galaxy brain and figuring out something that nobody else could. But Sheoldred wasn't a complete lie. We were getting one in Dominaria United. It was just a different one. We have Sheoldred the Apocalypse, a 4 mana Phyrexian Praetor with Death Touch, a 4/5. Whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life, and whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. So not as much going on, and that's kind of a relief, because by comparison to the other Praetors, the Sheoldred Insidious Conqueror looked very powerful, looked pretty overwhelming. A lot of synergies there. The ward of discarding 2 is just insane. So here you don't have that kind of protection, but what you do have is a completely different way to play. So rather than focusing on opponent's creatures dying and taking control of them, here it's all about card draw. Your card draw, your opponent's card draw, and how to benefit off of that. What's unique about this Sheoldred, and it's not something that you can save for a lot of new commander options, she may in fact be better as one of the 99. 2 commander options come to mind here. We have Nekasar the Mindraiser, obviously, and the reason why you'd want to throw her in there is because you have more access to wheels. All you really do is have to play 2 of them back to back. They're taking 1 damage for each card they draw because of Nekasar, and they're losing 2 life for each card they draw. So if they draw 7, that's a total of 21 life. Do that twice, that's 42. With Queza, Augur of Agonies from New Capenna, well, I don't think you have as good a commander here. You are following along with the theme, you are giving yourself more access to different colors. And what you'd want to do immediately if you had access to blue, and especially red, is play the wheels. Play Wheel of Fortune, play Windfall 2. Anything that makes it easy to force your opponents to draw a lot of cards at once. The trick here with Nekasar and that strategy for many years has been to just overwhelm your opponents before they can get anything established. Yes, they're going to be drawing a lot more cards than they should. That's not good for you fundamentally speaking, but if you can follow it up with 3 life loss per card, that is very devastating. That's going to have an impact. So let's talk about how to build around Sheoldred specifically as a commander. I mean, it's a very straightforward build, but we do have a couple things we can synergize with. The first one is obviously going to be card draw. What I like about this Sheoldred is that she doesn't just offset life loss as part of drawing cards as the cost for any kind of ability. If you're drawing 2 cards for 2 life, you'll be gaining 2 life, because you'll lose 2 and then you'll gain 4, and this is very common out of cards like Night's Whisper, Sign in Blood, Read the Bones. Sign in Blood's probably going to be an all-star for this commander, just because if you want to, you can target another player, make them draw 2 cards, lose 2 life, but they're going to lose 4 more life. I don't think we've quite had anything like this in Black before. We've had power, we've had incredible payoffs, but to have a commander that just gets around one of the biggest downsides of Black, I mean, this is a characteristic of Black and Magic, is sacrificing creatures, paying life, in order to get ahead in the game. If you don't have to suffer that life loss as often with this commander, you're going to get pretty far ahead. And I categorize a lot of good commanders because of their ability to become engines, meaning that they can get you through your deck quicker. Sheoldred isn't an engine. Sheoldred is just a payoff, but it's a payoff in a way that encourages you to play more cantrips, play more cards like these that will draw you into your next spells, that will gain you some life in the process. If you filled a mono black deck with cards like these, you were also going to want payoffs to help you gain some life back. We rarely had any that directly dealt with you drawing cards. So I think this is really incredible. And there are just a ton of spells like these where you draw 2 cards, you lose 2 life. Blood Pact is basically the 3 mana instant speed version of Sign in Blood. And Stinging Study is another instant speed way of drawing a bunch of cards. I like this because in Commander 5 mana to draw 4 cards, and you're going to gain 4 life. That's a really good deal. Again, what I would do if I'm building around this Sheoldred, it's just lean into the card draw. Lean into the card draw with the downside of normally losing life, and net yourself a couple life each time you play one of these. And as a reminder, folks, this is not a deck tech series. This is a how to build, how to strategize, so I don't go over every single card that I would fit into one deck, but rather I discuss different possible strategies and how that could be useful for the commander option in question. But then we have the Hail Mary cards that I think are really cool, where it's about a bunch of card draw all at once. Skeletal Scrying, I think, has always been an iffy card. I think back in the day it was a lot better in Commander. Back when you were looking for mass card draw, you were also willing to give up cards in your graveyard, not just losing life. So this might be more viable nowadays, it might make a return, although personally I think the cost of also removing X cards from your graveyard is a bit too much. Damnable Pact, however, is going to see play with this commander, because you can target an opponent, have them draw X cards, and lose X life. This is a black burn spell all the way. This is what you're going to use to end an opponent's game, because they're not just losing the X life off of X put into this spell, they're losing 2 life for each card they draw because of Sheoldred. And also, it's good if you just want to draw cards yourself and not have to lose a bunch of life. Peer into the Abyss is probably the best win con if you're just looking to knock out your strongest opponent, because they're already losing half their life, they're drawing half their library, and they're losing 2 life for each individual card. So that right there, for 7 mana with your commander out there to effectively knock out a player, no matter what point in the game it is, that's pretty insane. To continue, this is nothing new. Black has had this ability for a long time where in exchange for drawing cards, you're paying life. So instead of just drawing that additional card at the beginning of your upkeep with Phyrexian Arena and losing a life, you'll be gaining a life off of that and 2 more because of the card you draw afterwards. Underworld Connections is another one that says you pay a life to draw a card. Again, these two have seen a ton of play in mono black. If you need more card draw, it's usually been at the cost of some life. And with Sheoldred, that is pretty much not just ignored, but reversed. So you're ending up netting yourself some life along the way. And maybe the best enchantment you can throw into this deck is Greed, because compared to the other two, it's had the massive downside of not just paying 1 life, but 2 life for each card you want to draw in that 1 black mana. With Sheoldred, this is effectively just 1 black mana to draw a card, which is ridiculously good. That's where this commander option is going to shine. She's not an engine, but she makes every other source of card draw in mono black way better. Speaking of enchantments, this card probably would have been the best card you could ever include if it were legal in Commander, but Yawgmoth's Bargain. You skip your draw step, but you can pay 1 life to draw a card. With this Sheoldred, you wouldn't be losing any life for doing that. You'd be gaining life, and you could keep doing this until you get to your win cons. I just thought it was worth bringing up because it's funny, so just know that in advance when you go to build around this commander, this is one of the cards you're not allowed to play, even though it's really good. I mean, even without Sheoldred, it's still ridiculously good, but to think this was another commander that justifies its banning. Now, if you focus on card draw, of course, not everything's going to be about just drawing cards. You're going to want to complement the payoff, and I think the payoff of forcing damage on your opponents, making them lose a life, anything like that, is really essential. It's going to help you add on to whatever damage you're dealing to them, the life they're losing because of Sheoldred, and it's what you really need if you're going to be helping them out with drawing additional cards, because that's the worst thing you can do in a deck like this. It's the worst thing you could do in Nekusar. Give them a bunch of resources, and you're not making them pay for them. So Underworld Dreams, Fate Unraveler, and Cezanne, Perverter of Truth all do something similar. They're going to be dealt damage or they're going to lose a life because of Cezanne. Cezanne kind of follows closer to the group hug strategy. They are going to be losing 2 life, but they're going to be losing 4 more because of Sheoldred. It's not just going to affect your opponents either, it's going to allow you to draw 2 more cards, and Sheoldred totally offsets the life that you would lose. Continuing that, you could of course play the colorless sources of group card draw, where you'd have Howling Mine, Horn of Greed, Font of Mythos. These all can help your opponents or hurt them with our commander out there. What's great about this commander is I don't think you necessarily even have to play these. This is just a go-to for people who are used to Nekusar. I still think it's worth it though, experimenting with at least a Howling Mine just to see how it goes. I wouldn't make it a habit of just constantly giving your opponents extra card draw with these, because all it would take is for them to remove your Sheoldred and suddenly your payoff is gone. That was the biggest downside of any Nekusar deck, is if they dealt with Nekusar, what else is dealing them damage? But we have other ways of punishing your opponents, either from them drawing cards or you drawing cards. I like Master of the Feast and Ob Nixilis the Hate Twisted because these really hurt your opponents in the long term. Master of the Feast is yet another way of benefiting our opponents, although I think getting this in creature form, a 5/5 flyer, is a little bit sweeter. You don't get the card draw, but again, the whole goal here is to punish your opponents with Sheoldred. Psychosis Crawler's been around for a while. You draw cards, each opponent loses life. And Ob Nixilis is basically Underworld Dreams. There are a lot of good support creatures for this strategy too. I think Erebos God of the Dead is a very underrated card in Commander. Its activated ability is basically a worse greed, because not only did you still have to lose 2 life for doing it, and you're only drawing 1 card, you're paying 2 mana to do that. With Sheoldred, you're only paying that 2 mana to draw a card, which is a lot better. It's also a great static ability, making it so that your opponents can't gain life, which is also incredibly underrated. You have some of these cards that do that, but because it's such a subtle thing, it's not a central focus for a lot of strategies, so people tend to ignore it. And some people may actually forget that this does that, and opponents will gain life and get back into the game. So if you are paying attention, this could be one of the best cards you play. Dread Presence is a very underrated creature in black. From M20, it basically has a landfall trigger for swamps. You can draw a card, you lose 1 life, so Sheoldred's gonna offset that life loss. All around solid creature in black. Rankle, Master of Pranks, of course, has the combat damage trigger, where each player loses 1 life and draws a card. Another way to make your opponents lose even more life while you gain more. Another strategy you could lean into is, of course, life gain, although I do think that out of the 2 strategies, this is going to be the most boring. It doesn't offer you any card draw, it doesn't offer you any way of getting through your deck quicker. It's just an extra payoff, so I don't know if you want to go for this or go for more of the Underworld Dreams type of payoff, where you're dealing more damage to your opponents based on the cards they're drawing. You could still make this work though. I just don't know if you would want to play a lot of both, because you could get all bottlenecked and you wouldn't have anything that helps you get to your next spells. That being said, there aren't really too many that I would consider playing outside of just good mono black Sanguine Bond abilities. It does offer you a pretty powerful win con, a 2-card win con here with Veto, Sanguine Bond, and Exquisite Blood, giving you that infinite loop and winning you the game. Even more win cons, you have Exsanguinate, Grey Merchant of Asphodel at times can be a win con, and something that I like maybe the most because it's going to sit on the field long term is Wound Reflection. Your opponents are going to lose life for the cards they draw, and you know they're going to lose it if you have Sheoldred out there. So this adds more of a punch to any kind of spell where you're giving your opponents free card draw. Now we move on to the single cards where I feel like these are going to be the biggest all-stars. Curse of Fool's Wisdom from Commander 2019 is one of those cards I've always looked to play in a deck. Of course, Nekasar for a long time has been one of the few ones where I would feel comfortable throwing this in, because it is a whopping 6 mana if you can't get the Madness trigger off. We do have Curse decks, but Curse decks are very hit or miss. But with this Commander in Sheoldred, I really like it. I think you're going to be able to punish one opponent while also punishing everyone else, basically doubling up on whenever they draw a card, so they're not just losing 2 life, they're losing 4, turning even the most mild sources of card draw for your opponents into death sentences. This does put them on a clock, and it's probably to no one's surprise that Dark Deal is another big card. It's really the only mono black wheel that we have to choose from. That being said, it isn't guaranteed to offer you the same kind of power that a wheel will. It has a higher ceiling, meaning that if your opponents have a lot of cards in their hand, that it's going to force them to draw even more cards, kind of like Windfall. But they discard all the cards in their hand, then they draw that many cards -1, so it is most likely not going to have the same impact as a wheel, but it's still probably one of the best cards that you can play with this commander. Next, we have a card that I think is going to be an all-star for sure, even though I haven't personally played with it yet, is Eldritch Pact. 7 mana from Battle for Baldur's Gate. This sorcery is pretty incredible. Target player draws X cards and loses X life, where X is the number of cards in their graveyard. It's very similar to Damnable Pact. It's another one of these cards where it could go both ways, either benefit you tremendously or punish a single opponent tremendously, likely knocking them out of the game. 7 mana is okay, it encourages you to play it in the late game, and that's when you want to play this anyway. So if they have 10 cards in their graveyard, they're going to draw 10 cards and lose 10 life. With Sheoldred out there, that's going to turn into a whopping 30 for your opponent if you target an opponent. If it's you, you're drawing that many cards and you're gaining basically that much life, since you're gaining 2 for each card you draw with Sheoldred. It not only offsets the loss, it gives you a net positive. Incredible card. It only affects 1 player for 7 mana, which is the worst thing about it, but when you consider it could very easily knock that player out of the game. Again, it's like Peer into the Abyss. It's 7 mana, but it's worth every bit of that. We have another card that I think is more tech, more utility, not necessarily going to be a death blow, but something that is just solid all around, and it doesn't see enough commander play, and that is Mask of Griselbrand. The equipped creature has flying and lifelink, and whenever the equipped creature dies, you may pay X life, where X is its power. And if you do, you draw X cards. So giving this to any creature is going to be useful, at least for the flying and lifelink. If that creature dies, ideally you want this to be on a different creature. You want to save Sheoldred for the payoffs. Whatever downside there would be to drawing that many cards is suddenly erased. You don't have to pay that much life. I mean, you technically do, but you'll be gaining life off of this. If you're someone who's tired of playing the same things over and over again in every deck like Skull Clamp, here you have something that's going to synergize with life gain and life loss and card draw, in addition to giving good keywords. And then we have probably the best card. If I had to pick one card that you have to play with Sheoldred, it is Well of Lost Dreams. This artifact says whenever you gain life, you may pay X mana, where X is less than or equal to the amount of life you gained, and if you do, you draw X cards. Meaning if you have the mana with Sheoldred out there, you could keep your turn going drawing cards until you run out of mana. This does have combo potential with your commander. If you play the card Scourge Familiar, you can choose and discard a card to add black mana with Scourge Familiar, and in doing that, you'll be able to have more mana to pay into Well of Lost Dreams, allowing you to basically get to whatever win cons you have. It's yet another way that you could easily win the game with the Sheoldred. And I like this because it's not as over the top, basically a Turgid copy that the leaked Sheoldred was. So you're not just playing the same shell and adding maybe a couple different things to synergize with this card. Here you are synergizing with card draw. And you're doing it in a way, yes, that is similar to Nekasar, but then you have things like this because there is more of a life gain focus with a Sheoldred. And the last card that I think may end up being the second best card you could throw into a Sheoldred deck here is Alhamerit's Archive. Not as expensive as it used to be, but it's still kind of pricey. If you would gain life, you gain twice that much life instead. And if you would draw a card except the first one you draw on each of your draw steps, you draw 2 cards instead. So synergizes directly with 2 parts of this commander, the life gain and the card draw. All around, just a great card. If I recommend anything above any other cards, it's probably going to be Well of Lost Dreams first and then this card second. Everything else that I mentioned, I think you can experiment with at your own discretion. That's the whole point, again, of the How to Build series. It's not me giving you a deck list that you can copy and paste and not have to really create anything of your own. It's to experiment with ideas. So I'm giving you some ideas to experiment with. Maybe you like this idea better than that one. Maybe you want to create a hybrid, life gain, card draw deck. Maybe you just want to go pure card draw, maybe group hug, group slug, something like that. So if you appreciate the videos, again, subscribe to the channel. This Sheoldred is pretty incredible. Again, not as involving as the fake leaked Sheoldred, but being 1 mana cheaper, still having great stats and 4/5 death touch. You can't go wrong here if you want to build this as a commander. If Queza, Augur of Agonies has been popular, Sheoldred's going to be even more popular, not just because of the commander potential, but because of the 1 of the 99 potential. Commander Void here signing off. I will see you all next time.